This is HCPL's journey to becoming an IMLS medalist, and that is the most commendable nomination we can get in the United States for our work. And so I am just beyond thrilled to have him here with us today, and particularly about the message that he's going to be bringing to us, because I think it's so important to getting us into another territory where we have not gone. And we have pockets of this, but we don't have, this is not in our majority think tank yet. And I'm hoping that he is going to educate us and help bring us more towards this mindset that we really need to obtain. Thanks, y'all.
So I'm Edward Melton. I'm the library director for Harris County Public Library. And I just want to put out a disclaimer before I start. Just because I carry the title of the library director does not mean that I have any type of specialness to me. I'm just a librarian, just like everyone else. I work in library spaces. I work with community. And so I don't have any type of magic or mystical powers that that you all don't possess. And so the things that I do in the community are very similar to all the things that you all do in the community and that you can do in the community. And so it's just that at Harris County Public Library, I've had the opportunity and I have been fortunate enough to do the work that I've been able to do within that community. Empathy in Action, ACPL's journey to becoming an IMLS medalist. One of the things in libraries, we use a lot of acronyms. So you say ACPL, what is that really? Harris County Public Library. So Harris County Public Library, 26 branches in unincorporated Harris County. And you may ask, well, where's Harris County? We're in Houston, Texas. And so total population of Harris County is 4.7 million people, 2.7 in the city, 2 point something in the county, but huge service population. But we have in Harris County, we have a mix of rural libraries, suburban libraries, urban libraries. So we span the gamut in terms of the communities that we work in. And so the thing about Harris County Public Library too is that we don't have a cookie cutter approach to the way we provide services. We really allow each one of our branches, those 26, 27 branches that we have, to have the autonomy to do the work that is specific towards their community. And so if we were to, we've tried, believe me, we've tried to do cookie cutter approaches to things, say, okay, everyone's going to do this thing, it's going to look like this. That does not work. Because you have one rural community say, we don't even have an audience for that. Or you have one suburban community say, our audience wants something totally different from the same service. You know, they want to utilize it different. And so that's where we have to have the ability to be dynamic enough to pivot within our spaces to understand how we can make the service relevant to the people who we serve. And that's the one of the key ingredients that we do in terms of actually putting empathy in action in terms of understanding what the community needs are and then acting on the community needs based on what they're asking. Next slide. So IMLS, one of the questions I get all the time is, so what is this IMLS medalist thing? What does that stand for? And so that is the Institute of Museum Library Services, which is a federal government agency based out of DC. And Harris County Public Library in 2024, we were nominated by two of our congresswomen, Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher and the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Both of them nominated us for this honor. And that goes into relationship building. So one of the things that I was just talking to Jesse about was that when I first came to Harris County, I said, I'm working with the library. I'm not politically affiliated. I'm not part of this government thing. I'm the public library. And so all that other stuff really is beyond my pay grade. But it's really not. I'm really, as being part of Harris County, the library is highly integrated into government services, county government services. And so with that, I had to reinvent or rethink how the library is positioned within that governmental ecosystem. How do we create value within that system where we're competing against sheriffs, parks and recreation, public health, pollution control, all these other entities that have this perception of higher value than the library. So it really made me rethink about how do, as a library, do I position myself so that we can have just as much value or as great value as these other organizations without the threat of those other county agencies or organizations thinking that we're trying to step on their toes or get in their lane or whatever the case might be. But through that, I learned that everyone in county governments needs help to get across that line of performance, to get across, to be able to show value within the community. And so how do we say, okay, parks and recreation, how can I help you to do this thing that you're doing? Public health, how can I help you to bring awareness to infant mortality? Pollution control, how can we, and if you've been in Houston, you know the ship channels and all that industry, how can we educate people on the impact of pollution within the environmental pollution within the community? We have 26 branches across Harris County. Can any of you all utilize the space that we have here in the community as gathering spaces so that you can communicate whatever it is that you want to communicate? And so by utilizing our facilities as a tool for other organizations within the county government to kind of say, you know what, we want to have a town hall meeting, but where is the best place to have that where people are already gathering, people are already coming to, people feel comfortable with a trusted institution? We have 26 libraries across the county. So we welcome your town hall meeting. People are going to come, people know where we're at. And it creates that environment of collaboration and partnership between the different county departments to say, hey, we're in this thing together. We work closely with organizations like Harris County Juvenile Probation Department. And so even with that relationship, none of this stuff happens overnight. It's taken me years to work with the Harris County Juvenile Probation Department because their whole approach is we're a detention center, we're isolated, we don't work with the public, we don't want any outsiders. But then how can you talk to those agencies like that and say, you know what, if we provide you with, and so they had a library in their spaces in the Juvenile Probation Department, but it was books that was donated. So kids, they didn't want to read those books. They was graffitiing the books, tagging the books, taking the pages out, doing all kinds of stuff to it. And we said, okay, well, give us a chance to provide these students or these people with high interest materials, and let's see what happens in that. Just give us a little time to pilot that. So they let us come in and we started curating collection, high interest materials, and we noticed a phenomenon. The students that were the juveniles that were incarcerated, they took ownership and agency of those books. And they said, you know what? If we want to continue to have these books, we have to take care of them. We can't tag them up. We can't take the pages out, because if we do those things, we won't have these things. And we want these things because it's giving us an outlet to see beyond where our current circumstances are, and even help us to reflect where we're at right now. And so with that program, we started seeing that the students themselves started doing the readers advice, just like, hey, don't tear up that book. And when are you going to finish that book? Because I want to read it next, because John was telling me about this, or Joe was telling me about this book, whatever. And we saw this dynamic thing happen where the students who were incarcerated took ownership and agency and really started advocating for themselves in terms of literacy, wanting to learn, those different type things. So as I go through this presentation and I talk about how Harris County Public Library received this highest honor by demonstrating excellence in the service in the community, we did not do this alone. We did this through partnership, collaboration throughout the community in order to drive that value that we have as a library system. Next slide. Couple of things just a couple of projects I want to highlight that we did in terms of getting to this, receiving this honor. One of the things that we participated in during the pandemic, there was ARPA funding. Everyone probably heard of the American Rescue. Is it American Rescue Plan? Yes, something to that effect. But in that program or in that funding, they provided emergency connectivity fund because they saw that students didn't have access to technology, no broadband connectivity, no computers. And so we decided that we were going to distribute devices to the community, both Wi-Fi, hotspots, and Chromebooks. My staff initially came to me and said, okay, we want to do this distribution. Let's do maybe 5,000 devices. And I was just like, oh, that sounds too safe. I was like, give me a number that's going to scare you. That's going to make you be fearful of us really being able to achieve this goal. And then they said, well, what about 10,000? I said, what's the maximum number that we can go for? They was just like, well, how about like 40,000 devices? It's like, that sounds like a number that we should be pushing towards. So the first round, we did 40,000 devices. We distributed those devices, and the question all of my staff is saying, how are we going to distribute these devices through 26 branches? It's kind of like, and we got the small window of opportunity. How are we going to do this? That's where the community partnerships came in. Working with community-based organizations, working with our precincts. And so the Harris County Public Library, we work up under 4 commissioners. Each one has a precinct. And believe it or not, every commissioner, every county judge, every city manager, every political person wants an opportunity to highlight the work and impact that they have within their community. And so with this distribution, we said, okay, we have 40,000 devices. We need for you all to help us to reach your constituents to distribute these devices. This is just a win for them. So the commissioners were just like, yes, we can distribute these at our community centers. Yes, we can distribute these at the annex building. This is a photo opportunity. This is whatever the case might be. And seize that opportunity to say, the county is trying to bridge the digital divide. So we distributed 40,000 devices. And I said, oh, it's still a window of opportunity for us to do this work. Let's apply for another 30,000 devices. Apply for another 30,000 devices. For this program, distribute over 70,000 devices to the community for them to have access to broadband connectivity and also to have access to computers. Because we saw that it was this huge divide that even if we knew it was going to be temporary, we knew the funding wasn't going to be fair, but we wanted to take advantage of this moment in time to be able to provide this level of access. Question that staff had with this program is like, we're going to distribute 70,000 devices. How are we going to get these devices back? How are we going to manage this process so that we can make sure that people are taking care of them? We can make sure that they return them. Are we going to give them fines? Are we going to charge them fees if they don't return it? How is that going to work? So I said, you know what? Let's check them out for the life of the device. So when the device stops working, they can return it. But the understanding is that we are checking out the device until it turns into a brick. And when I say it turns to a brick, you don't have any more connectivity, you can't utilize it. And even when talking with T-Mobile and AT&T service providers and Google, they were saying, well, when we got ready to run out of funding, we was just like, well, we're looking for other avenues of funding so that we can continue this program. But if the funding stops, can we reactivate those devices? And T-Mobile, AT&T, just like, we really wouldn't even want to reactivate those devices because the technology is dated. This is 2-3-year-old technology. The Chromebooks, the life of the Chromebook is a year and a half, maybe 2 years at the most, if people are taken care of. So if you collect those devices if you want to, but all we're going to do is recycle. There's no more use for them because, and so for me, it was just like, okay, well, people just keep them for the life of the device. And when they bring them back, they bring them back. If they don't, it's no loss for us because the device has no utility anymore, no connectivity. There's no really purpose for it anymore. So that was our approach to it. Some people once the program stopped, they transitioned over to ACP, which was short-lived also. But then we also had some agreements in place with T-Mobile that they would provide discounted rates for people who wanted to have connectivity beyond what we were providing in terms of this program. But what we saw in the program, and so we got to understand too, everything is not going to be successful in the way that we want to think about it in terms of long-term sustainability. And so when we saw that the program was ending, people were saying, oh, well, this program has failed. What are we going to do now? And my approach was just like, oh, it should fail because it's not a sustainable model. And so because it's not a sustainable model, let's allow it to fail. And when it fails, then people will say, hey, I had connectivity for 2 years. Now I don't have connectivity. And this is how it's impacting my life. And so I want to go talk to my commissioner. I want to go talk to my council member. I want to go talk to my congressperson and tell them that, I had connectivity. I can't afford it because I have these other bills and things that I have to take care of. But this was the impact that it had on my life. And now this is the impact that it has on my life now that I don't have connectivity. And so it's that type of thing where we help to give the community agency in terms of what the impact the library has on their lives. And so when you give someone something and they get used to it, and then all of a sudden you take it away from them, then they say, well, wow, what am I going to do now? Their voice is going to be stronger because now they see what that need is. They see what the value of that having that connectivity is. Houston, Harris County, we are prone to hurricanes. So when a hurricane comes through, you go without electricity for 2 or 3 days, you go without internet connectivity for 2 or 3 days, and you will probably in that third day, going into the 4th, 5th day, probably think the world is going to come to an end, especially without electricity in the middle of the summer, no air conditioning, and you're thinking, are we going to survive this? Yes, you are, but it gives you a different perspective of what happens when you take away something that we take for granted, the electricity, connectivity, away from someone, and how do you interact with the rest of the world when you don't have those things that we take for granted. So that was the same thing for me with the Mercy Connectivity Fund, is that it showed the community, it provided the stakeholders with a voice to say, this is what need that we had that was being served, now it's being taken away. And so now at all levels, whether it's the local level, the state level, federal level, people are talking about not having connectivity. This thing just didn't start overnight about, the digital divide. It's been happening for 20 plus years. And I think about when I first got into this space, it was 20 plus years that I was putting computers in libraries on a dial-up connection. And so just think about it. If you had a building this size on a dial-up connection, and for those who don't know what a dial-up connection is, where you think a couple of things and you just hit. And then you finally connect, and then when it connects, it just gives the slow, turbo-paced connectivity. And we were connecting buildings with computer labs to this type of connections, DSL. And so it wasn't a thing about broadband back then. But now we see broadband and we say, wow, people need these type of speeds in order to be productive, leverage the playing field for everyone to be able to have these same opportunities that we have by using this technology, having this level of access. And this is where public libraries come into place, because especially in some rural or smaller communities, the infrastructure is not even there. You don't have broadband coming out because you don't have fiber in the community. You might not have cellular connectivity, and if you do, it may be hit or miss. That's where, even with this funding that's coming down from the federal government, this is the moment in time where we really have to activate as library system to say the value of why we need to bring this broadband into our libraries through E-rate, through the FCC, follow up with the FCC in order to make sure that they continue to fund E-rate so that libraries can have that discount of 90% connectivity and have the federal government subsidize it so that we can connect the broader community to these technologies, to these services. And so that farmer out may not want connectivity or even have access or even know the value of having internet connectivity. But in our work, if we can just say, hey, you know what? You can come to the library and order that part for your tractor, and we can have, and that company can send it to you. It opens up their opportunities. It opens up their ability to create or generate more revenue, help it develop that local economy in order to have the impact that or to bring that value that we as libraries have in terms of providing access to services. Next slide. Another thing that we do in Harris County, we are a large county. I know the time that it took for me to drive here today is sometimes it's about the same amount of commute that I have sometimes within the county. It's a huge county in terms of just driving. And so sometimes sometimes it even take me long to get to some of my locations than it takes me to come up here to College Station. So it may take me an hour and a half or 2 hours sometimes to get across the county, just depending on where I'm at. So, but with that, we do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of partnerships. And we take the services out to where people are at, because with having places that are rural, having suburban locations that are growing, and the county is by no means is keeping up with the population growth. You talk about a county or that expanding population-wise exponentially. There's no way that even if we started building libraries today in every community that need it, it would probably be 10 to 15, 20 years before we can meet that need. And then by that time, it's outgrown us again. So we know that we'll never be able to meet that need in terms of having the amount of locations that really would truly facilitate a system that could support the population's service. But with that, we provide a lot of outreach services. And so with our outreach services, we don't do it in isolation. So we have a fleet of what we call curiosity cruisers, which are mobile libraries, but it's specifically geared towards early level reading and early literacy. So it's really for elementary school kids up to 5th grade, where we do STEM exercises, and we also provide home libraries. And with this program, it's really funded by a nonprofit organization. The Barbara Bush Youth and Literacy Foundation provided us with the vehicles. They provide us with the books that we give away. We don't check out those books. We give them away so that students can have their own home libraries. They provide all the funding for our programming. And the collateral that we provide is the staff and the maintenance of the vehicles. So it's a win-win for them, because they're in the literacy space. They want to provide literacy, but they don't have the capacity to reach out into the community. But we have that capacity to reach out in the community. So we say, hey, give us the vehicles, we'll provide the staff, give us the materials, the books, we'll provide the education for the students. Win-win for them. They have this great thing that they're doing in the community with the Curiosity Cruises. We have this great thing that we're doing with Curiosity Cruises. The community sees the impact of it. These cruises are like the ice cream truck. When kids see them coming, they're running down the street, they're grabbing their parents, and I need to get down to the community center because the cruises are coming. So with that partnership, we've been able to do so much more than we would have been able to do. We have a marketing campaign through the Barbara Bush Youth and Literacy Foundation. They created mascots for it, Albatron and Northtail, which are these reading superheroes. And so we bring them out, but we wouldn't have been able to reach that level of outreach without that partnership. And so that's where the importance of the partnership comes into place. We also do a lot of outreach in terms of sending our librarians out into the community with mobile outreach librarians. They do digital literacy. And with that, we customize that training to be relatable to the communities that we serve. And so, say for example, if we're working with seniors, we're not saying, okay, all the seniors want to learn how to use Excel and Word and do these sophisticated things, that we know that you can do on the computer. Some of the seniors just say, you know what, I just want to be able to send an email to my granddaughter or send a picture to this person. And so you really have to identify what that need is for that community, for that population, for the people who you're talking to at that time in order to tap into what their true needs are. You know, when I first got into doing technology with libraries, everyone had these curriculums, and we thought that everyone wanted to learn how to use Microsoft Word. We thought everyone wanted to use how to Excel. We thought everyone wanted to research using our databases. We weren't proactive Google, because we was like, Google is going to take away our power as librarians. But then we had to learn to embrace Google and say, okay, it's a tool just like our resources databases are, to help us maximize our access to information. And there's some work that we do in that space to help people to get relevant and factual information. But after they receive that information, it's up to them what they do with it. And so we don't, and that's I think that's one of our challenges as an industry, is that we provide all these wonderful services, but we don't know what people do with it. And so they go off into the ether, into the world, of the universe, and then they do all these amazing things, not knowing that the library was part of that experience that helped them to get that job, helped them to prepare that resume, that helped them to even get on the computer or even use a mouse. It's some of the things that we don't see, or even like with children, we don't see like a story time where you may read a story to a child, and that story might be profound in their lives in terms of giving them that window into something that they didn't understand, or giving them an interest in something that they didn't know was a possibility. And now from that, they've turned into a engineer, or they're into aeronauticals or space or whatever the case might be. We never know how that experience might translate into future impact. But that's how we have to position ourselves to drive the value of the work that we do. We also had a program that I want to point out. We had a program called Grad Cafe, where we partnered with the Tejano Center in order to provide college and career readiness. With that program, we had an external partner that we contracted with provide that service. And so it got to be costly. And so we did the math on it, and we went back to our commissioners court and said, we're paying X amount of dollars to contract out for the Tejano Center to provide Grad Cafe. If we brought this service in-house, we could save up to $1 million to provide the same service in-house and have greater impact, because now we will have consistency in how we provide this program. We can have more hours, we can have more programming, we can have more staff to be able to do these things, and we're going to save the county X amount of dollars. And so with the county commission, then it's like, that makes sense. Let's try to see how we can do that. And my whole point of that example is sometimes you have to partner with knowing that the end goal is to figure out how do you get future funding for sustainability for some of these programs that you do. It's like planting a seed, nurturing it. You may know how it's going to grow, you may not know how it's going to grow, but then that's where it comes to planning, in order to strategically understand how, if the opportunity presents itself, that you can seize that moment to say, you know what? We currently partner with the organization to provide college and career preparedness. Now, say the Target Foundation wants to invest in college and career preparedness. If we brought it in-house, then we can utilize that funding in a different type of way in order to do that program ourselves, increase our budget in terms of our how we provide the service. But it's those type of things that you have to think outside the box, plant the seed in terms of what our end goal, and be able to pivot and be ready for when those funding opportunities come available to you, that you can say, hey, we can pivot in this type of way if you give us this money. And it makes it an easier conversation, because you have the proof of concept, you have the value, you have the data to show that you've done this work, and it just makes it an easier conversation for funders to be able to say, you know what, it does make sense for us to invest in this type of work. Next slide. So enhanced library cards. This was a service that we got recognition for that was not of our own making. So we have an organization in Harris County called Texas Organizing Project. And so they came to the commissioners, and a couple of commissioners say, people don't have identification cards. We have a large immigration population, and we have issue with people not being able to participate in things because they don't have identification card. And it was just like, well, what can the county do about that? So the county does not have the authority to issue identification cards. And we looked at, and we had conversations with the commissioners, and they said, well, what if we turn the library cards and enhance the library cards so that they can serve as a picture ID and also serve as a library card, and have all of these required fields that would be needed in order for someone to identify. So like the date of birth, address, some things that have to be verified in order for you to issue out a valid identification card. So we looked at that, and we developed that service around enhanced library cards, where we do provide library cards that can serve as a identification. With that work, though, it took us to work with other county departments, other agencies within the city and the county, banks, to be able to say, will you allow this form of identification to be accepted at your institution? And initially, no one was like, no, we are not going to accept it. In the course of us rolling out these cards, people started going to their banks to open up an account to say, hey, I want to use this as a form ID in order to open up a bank account. And the funny thing happened is that the bank started sending all these referrals to the library. So we was received all of these little slips. People would come in, they may not even be able to speak English, and they say, the bank told me to come here and get an ID so I can get a bank account so I can cash my checks. It's like, where are you getting this information from? Wells Fargo, Woodforest Bank. They sent me here. And I'm like, oh, okay. We started seeing that dynamic happen where, and no one still, not, it was some, like the sheriff's department, public health, some of the other county departments officially got on board and say, we'll accept this as identity. But none of the banks still won't say that they officially take it as an identification, but they do accept it as a form of identification so that people can utilize it to open up an account. And so for me, that goes back to economics. The banks want you to deposit your money. They want you to use them. And so because they see that economic return, they're going to accept that library card as an identification so that person can open up that account. And so we saw that dynamic happen where you give people information, you give people agency, and some of these things will organically happen in terms of the value that they create. But we have to be astute enough, and we are, to know what those things are and how we can drive value with the things that we do in terms of library services. Next slide. Okay, so I know that we are after lunch. Everyone gets sleepy. Everyone wants to take a lunch nap. But what I want you to do is I want you to think about your journey, your own personal journey. I want you to think about, where did your path to library start and work? Whether your path to library work start, what initially attracted you to this line of work. And then after you formulate that in your mind, everyone has a story about when they started working or how they started working or why they work in libraries. After you think about that, then think about your personal values. What do you prioritize in your professional life? What strengths and talents and skills do you bring to your job that make you uniquely suited for this work? And then also, I want you to think about your purpose. What do you believe your work, how do you believe your work contributes to the larger purpose or goal, to a larger purpose or goal? And how do you want to make a difference or leave a legacy in your career? So think about that for a moment. And I am going to call on some people to ask about your experience, because I want you to think, I want you to wake up, I want you to engage. So anyway, Where did your library, your path to library work start? Anyone can answer that question. Yes.
When I was 7 years old, I went to the King County Public Library System branch in my neighborhood, and no one stopped me from going into the adult section. I read Stephen King, read Poe, I was goth before it was a thing, and none of the libraries told me I couldn't check out that book.
And they gave you impact
Yes.
that the librarians or librarian didn't understand that they have in life.
Mhm.
Those who got in where you're at. Story for me. In my community, where I grew up at, I grew up with my great-grandparents. So it was a couple of days going with my grandparents. They weren't remember to take me anywhere. They was like, if you want to go to the library, you go. And it was safe back then. We could ride our bikes, mile, whatever. So if you want to go to the library, you go, but I'm not going. I'm not going to sign up for a library card. I don't want to be responsible because you lose a book. I want, so if you go and you're on your own, then I had the grades and everything from the library saying, because everyone really gets to know each other. And so they would, this whole thing about unattended children, they didn't really care about that, because they knew I was from the neighborhood. They were just like, well, okay. And so I was just like, I need a library card. My grandparents aren't going to sign for my library card. I had an older sister. I said, hey, sign for my library card. She's writing like an elementary student too. And so she signed for my library card. And I know that the staff knew that my sister had signed for my library card, but they was like, we would rather for this child to be able to have access to read versus him not wanting to read at all. And so it's those type of simple things that impacts our lives that impacts people's lives that we don't understand or know what that impact is going to be. And so I probably, maybe or maybe not, I would have worked in a library if I didn't have that experience. But that was part of my experience. So now with Harris County Public Library, people always ask me about creating a policy about unattended children. And I refuse to. And I understand that there's a need for people to parent or be present in their children's lives. But from my own experience, I would never been able to use a library if that was the expectation that my parents were going to bring me or that any adult was going to bring me. I never would have had that experience of using libraries. And so I know it's very challenging for my staff because we have locations that are right next to an elementary school and kids running all over the place. They're running over the library, it's overwhelming. Kids, very young kids running in the library doing things, and they're like, we need to have guidelines, policies, and things in place. But for me, I'm like, well, what is the trade-off? Do we change the lives of these children, or have an impact on the lives of these children by providing them with access, or do we just restrict it to the family or the children who are fortunate enough to have families that can bring them to the library? I'd rather just for everyone to equal that playing field so everyone can have access. And I know it's challenging for my staff. They get mad at me, they throw darts at me and all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, we all know our communities. We all know that even with those problem children, or I'm going to say problem, the children that provide us with challenges, we know that they're going to be the same ones that come in and day out. And it's just how do we refocus that energy so that they can be productive within the environment that we want them to be. Okay. Question 2. What initially attracted you to this line of work? Anyone can answer that. What made you want to do this work?
Answer that one. I came from Shreveport, came from a very small town, a provincial small town. And the first time that I ever saw true diversity was when I started. I was so fortunate to be hired in downtown, the Central Library in downtown Shreveport. And it was the first time that I had any opportunity to see that the public library was the only place on the map where it was a true social equalizer. And the fact that the business class, we're all going to come in there. They're going to be, today it's Today it's tablet technology, looking for what's newest fiction. But then it was the newspapers, the business class, a whole business class of people. They're in there looking in the investors section. They're standing beside someone who is homeless. They are sitting in a section that smells in order that they can get that information. And my eyes got wide open then. And I thought, this is a place I have got to be forever, because there were people in there who were schizophrenics. Typically, I had no idea that it was such an interesting place that was directly converse to what we all ever hear about public libraries if you go visit one. So I was immediately in love with the total diversity and the whole idea that there was so much equity, and without there being a whole lot of extreme support coming from, you get your belief system from ALA and that kind of thing. But the fact that I saw people who were practicing that philosophy, who lived that philosophy deeply without someone having to educate them to the nth degree. This is an important value. This is the way it's supposed to be. So that was my experience. So
That's the experience in having an understanding of empathy and how we know that we serve the whole community. So then my next question is, what strengths and skills do you bring to the job that make you uniquely suited for us? And I wanted to say it, explain it with this. We do not have every and all of the skills that we need to do this work. We have to pivot. We have to wear a whole lot of different hats that we aren't prepared for. School didn't prepare us for it. Life's experiences haven't prepared us for us yet. We got to live through these things. So when we talk about empathy for the communities that we serve, one of the primary things that we have to also have empathy for and great grace towards is ourselves. Understand that we're not going to be perfect. We don't have all the answers. Even though everyone thinks that a librarian has every answer to every question, that we are these super Google minds that know everything, we're limited. So with that, definitely apply grace to any of the work that you do. Know that it's not going to be perfect. Know that the effort is much more impactful than not doing anything at all, and move towards getting things done. So anyone, what is a skill that you bring to this job that is unique, that uniquely positions you to do this work? And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. Life is very basic. It's just that we make it complicated. But what are some of those basic things that you feel like you do within your community, within your work, that uniquely, a skill that you have that uniquely is suited to help you to do this work? Yes.
Mine is being there by the we have a lot of I guess industry there. And a lot of or big gun. But it does help.
And so that's a special skill in terms of having that diversity of culture, diversity of language that helps remove any of the barriers that we have in doing this work that we have to do. When I was talking to Luann earlier, we were talking about business models and how business models translate across all sectors. If you can run a business here in the United States, you can run a business in China, you can run a business in Russia, you can run a business in Africa. It doesn't matter, because a person who has, say, an MBA, that is, business practices are universal. It's the same regardless of where you go in the world. It's the same with libraries. Information is universal. It doesn't matter how or where you go in the world. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. People need access to information. People need to understand how to utilize that information, and people need to know how the value of that information. Information is very powerful, and that's what the business that we're into. Okay. How many people believe that we are contributing towards a larger purpose in terms of our work? All of it. We're just, it's even for a system like Harris County, we're a large system, but the impact we do is minor when we talk about it on a global scale. Even when we talk about being an IMLS meltist, it's minor when we talk about a global scale. There's so many communities throughout the country that have a lack of access to information. And so that's where we have to understand as libraries, whether you're in the urban area, a rural area, a small community, a large community, suburban community, wherever you're at, there is value in the work that you do because it's really the larger purpose, the larger mission that we have in terms of providing that access to information, giving people an opportunity to improve their quality of life, giving people an opportunity to see that there's other options, there's other, their abilities maybe beyond their own understanding. Your abilities as directors and leaders is beyond your own understanding. I can guarantee you there are staff who are working for you or you're working with that you're not even going to see their full potential. You see it now, but you're going to see how some of them blossom and grow and to do things beyond even your understanding or even beyond their own understanding. And so that's what we have to understand, that this work that we do has a larger impact. So you have those students who come, or these people who come into our library spaces, and they may run them up. They, kids, you might have adults who are dealing with mental health issues. But you never know how just by sharing or being empathetic towards what their work is, what they're in your library for, can help change their lives. One of my first libraries that I worked in, we had a guy he had some mental health issues and he had some drug abuse issues. So he would come in every day. He would be smelling like, he had been drinking all night and just came in off the streets, probably had just had a drink before he came in the library. And so we went through this process with him. It was days when we had to ask him to leave because he was just, out of character, just, extra because he had, maybe a little too much or whatever the case might be. And there was an ongoing thing where we were just like, okay, this is how you're going to have to conduct yourself when you come to the library. But he needed that. He wasn't coming because somebody was telling him, or a probation officer was telling him he was coming to the library because he needed to utilize something that we had. And so for him, he needed to use computers. He needed to do whatever he had to do to communicate with the outside world. And so at one point he went missing. He's just like, well, what happened to him? We don't know. And so over about 3 or 4 months, he came in later. He was cleaned up. He's just like, he apologized, thank you all for dealing with me. I was, going through these different challenges in my life, but now I'm on track. But if it wasn't for you all giving me that sense of grace to be able to come into your space and utilize, do the things I wanted to do, I would still had a lot of these challenges that I had. And so that's another thing. Sometimes those people don't come back to our doors and say, thank you, or, sorry for causing this disruption. They just go off. But that experience that they had, if we show that level of empathy, that level of understanding, even though it may not be in agreement with our lifestyle or our values, that we can help support that person in the reason why they're coming to utilize our spaces. And so with that, I want us all to think about, how do you want to make a difference? And what is the legacy that you want to leave in your career? And for some of us, we may never define that, or we don't even want to define that because it's beyond even our understanding. I ask myself that question all the time, and I was talking to my staff. I was like, well, what is really the value of our work? Once if I get taken out of the picture today, if I no longer here at Harris County Public Library, is that really going to have an impact? And so my staff is just like, well, it would have an impact because then we don't have the leadership, the vision, the guidance that has helped us to get to this point where we're at now. And so that's where, as library directors, value the work that you do. Understand the vision that you create, not for you, but for your community, and how that translates into a greater impact. When we talk about county or city government, it's essential that these entities or government entities show value on their investments in the community. They are the stewards of the public tax dollars. And so with that, they want to be able to say, yes, I'm investing in libraries so that we can do, contribute towards workforce development, contribute towards the economy. But traditionally, we haven't put ourselves in that position to be those economic drivers. Now we have the opportunity to leverage what we do to be economic drivers, to work in workforce development, and when I say this, not working in silos, but really understanding the landscape of our municipalities that we work in and creating that value. And so if you have a department that is struggling and you know that you're struggling, come together, figure out a way. And it doesn't, you may not even be able to figure it out. It's just like, this is some of the things that I'm focusing on. These are some of the things I'm looking at. How can you help, or can you help me to get to this outcome that I want? And that other department might say the same thing. Well, I'm struggling with this. Public relations. So it's, for example, I use public health. I'm not public health, but pollution control as a perfect example. They were struggling with getting communication out to the constituents in terms of the impact of chemical companies within the channel, the ship channel area of Harris County. But we have libraries, for whatever reasons, libraries have been strategically placed throughout counties, throughout cities, in places where they know people are going to go. And so with that, we easily able to say, hey, okay, we want to start educating parents. We want to start educating people about the impact of the environmental pollution. And so we started having workshops in town hall meetings, and people in those communities that lived in those communities say, oh, I didn't understand the impact of this. So then when you start having those communities, guess who's going to want to show up to be part of those conversations? People who make your local decision makers, your council members, your commissioners, your county judges. They're going to want to show up and say, hey, I want to be part of this conversation too. Let me get to the party. Everyone wants to be part of greatness. Everyone wants to be part of moving the needle towards a better society. And so how do we think about our services and position ourselves in a way that we can move towards being that great good for everyone within that county and that municipality? Next slide. Okay, here we go. Empathy in action. Couple of things that I just want you all to think about. How do you tailor your services to underserved populations? How do you create safe spaces for marginalized communities and offer programs that meet the emotional, education, and social needs of those populations? And so just think about it. With the work that you all do, I don't care what community you're in, you're going to have a part of your community that is underserved. Where are those people at? How can we access those people? And how can we provide them services that's going to be of value to them? And then once we provide that service, we have to make them feel well. It's kind of like you can't prepare a table of food for people and ask them to eat and then scold them when they reach for a plate. They're gonna be like, oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm breaking the rules. So you have to make that place welcoming. You have to make that place engaging. You have to make that place somewhere where they want to interact. And then once you touch on these things, like their emotional needs, their educational needs, their social needs, that's going to equal to value. That's the things they're going to say, wow, I need to go to the library. I want to come to the library because this is the place that's going to help me improve my quality of life. And then once we do that, then we want to make the connections. We want to identify with the real needs. We want to build trusted and relationships with the people who come into our spaces, the people who don't come into our spaces, the policy makers, the the council members, the commissioners. The interesting thing about majority of policymakers, whether it's on the state level, local level, federal level, they are not library users. That's really honest. They are not library users. They don't need the resources that we provide. And so when we talk to them and we say, we want you to support libraries, they're going back into their minds and they're thinking about the nostalgia of, oh, this is what my library experience was. I went there and I read books, or my parents made me go because whatever reason. And so it may be pleasant, it may not be pleasant, but it is it's antiquated. And so it's based on their perception of what they think libraries are. And so as often as you can, introduce them to what you do. Talk about the value of the work that you do. Have other people to speak on the work that you do. I'm always going to I attend commissioner's court faithfully, every commissioner's court. Whether it's an agenda item on it for the library or not, I'm faithfully attending those meetings. And even with my kids, they're just like, why would you punish yourself by going and sit into an 8-hour meeting every other Tuesday when they're not even talking about anything that has to do with the library? But they're talking about things that need to happen within the community. And so when I listen to those meetings, I'm listening to those other county departments talk about what problems they're trying to solve. Listen to other agencies come in and say, well, this is what we're trying to do. And then I sit back and I contemplate, how can I help that person? And then I'll set up a meeting and I'll just say, hey, I heard you're trying to do this thing where you're trying to educate people about whatever the case might be. How can I help you accomplish this goal that you're trying to reach? And magically, they say, oh, wow, you have 26 locations across the county. You have this audience. You have this technology. You have computers. You have connectivity. Yes, you can help me. I go to them with the offer that they can't refuse. I go with them with the offer of support. I go with them with the offer of value. I want to help them to be better so that they can help the library be better and help the library to have more value. And so now when pollution control, public health, JP, Harris County Juvenile Probation Department go up, and they speak about their budget items. They talk to the commissioners and they say, well, through this partnership with the library, we were able to do X, Y, and Z. Everyone, even when people are presenting their budgets, when people are presenting grant proposals, when you come with partnership, that built-in relationship, people give more value to it. Because now it's just not you moving as an organization, it's you moving with other organizations in order to get this outcome that everyone wants. And so that's how we have to start thinking about driving our work. How do we connect the dots with other agencies, other nonprofits, other community-based organizations, other county departments, and really say, okay, even though those other directors may not even have that thought in mind that of what you can do, because all of us have that nostalgia in our heads in terms of what we think libraries are. Even us who work here, we have these certain thoughts about what libraries are, what they should be. If we open up ourselves to understanding how do we support all of these other systems and services throughout our municipalities, it helps us to be able to better leverage how we can provide and create value for the organizations and the libraries that we do. None of this work happens overnight. So don't think that you're going to go tomorrow and meet with a council member or a commissioner and say, hey, I was at this workshop and I think we should work together and let's make this magic happen. It doesn't happen that way. It's really a relationship building. How do you get to the point of one just even having a sit down conversation with them? You know, and maybe that's your introduction, or maybe they see you at commissioner's court so much they're like, well, why does the library show up every time at commissioner's court? You know, or why is the library speaking about this thing? And then your other agencies, they can say the same thing. But then when you come and offer them that olive branch and say, hey, we're in this together. I want to work together. Let's make this thing happen for the county, for the city, whatever the case might be. People want to get on board with that. People sometimes people get stuck because they don't even know how to do the things that they want to do. But just by having that conversation, it can open their minds up to say, wow, we have this potential to do this other thing. Also, when we talk about leveraging data, that's one of the things that we think about all the time. And for libraries, traditionally, we haven't collected the type of data that shows the outcomes that we need to be able to show in terms of the impact, economic impact, or the value that we have in the library system. But that's another way that we can partner with community-based organizations or organizations that are already doing that type of work and saying, okay, food bank, we want to partner with you so that you can distribute out more food to your to the community. We don't have food, but we have 26 locations that you can distribute this food around. So we're going to provide you with this platform to distribute this food, and we're going to ask for you to provide us with data. How much food, how many pounds of food did you distribute through our library system? And so they come back with this amazing number. We distributed 10,000 pounds of food through the library. And then you invite your commissioners to come out during one of those food drives and say, hey, we distributed out 10,000 pounds of food during this food drive. We're helping your community with food insecurity. You say, wow, I want to take a picture. But then it puts your library in a different space in terms of how people think about you being utilized. Talked about Houston and hurricane season. So when a hurricane hits Houston, one of the biggest challenges is distributing good products to people who need them. Once again, libraries are a strategic place throughout the community. We can talk to the Office of Emergency Management and say, you know what? We got 26 branches across the county. You want to distribute water? People will come and pick up water from the library. You want to distribute blankets? People will come to the library and pick up blankets. You want to distribute backpacks? People will come to the library and pick up backpacks. We already have the infrastructure. So we tell other counties, take advantage of us. Utilize us as a service in order to do the work that you all need to do. But it creates a different dynamic, it creates a different value in terms of how we go about doing our work. And that's where we adapt and what we say innovate, but it's really not innovation. It's really just meeting the community needs, where people are at, and how they need those services. Next slide. Okay, so the things that we have to understand too when we talk about our doing this work is our staff and their professional values. It's 4 basic principles that Harris County Public Library drives with our staff. It's trust, passion, care, and learning. We want to trust our staff that they're going to want to do the thing that's best for the community, but we have to give them the autonomy to make those decisions. We have to give them the agency to say, okay, this is the idea. I don't know how it's going to work, but I trust you all enough to know that you can implement and make these things happen because you know the community better than I do. And especially in my position as Harris County, I don't know the ins and outs of every community. And so I might say, it's great to have food distribution everywhere, but then we might have some communities that say, you know what, we don't really need food distribution. And I'm just like, well, everyone needs food everywhere, right? Well, no, not in the way that you're trying to implement it. And so it's the staff that can go and tweak those little things in terms of your program offerings and your services to make them more compatible with what their needs are. And in some situations, you have to trust your staff when they say, we don't need this. It's really not a need for this type of service in our community. You know, why are we going to provide ESL classes when we don't have people who need ESL classes? We're in a rural community. We very limited in terms of everyone speaks English. So why are we going to have ESL just because you say we need it? And so that's what we have to be able to understand, that we can't do a cookie cutter approach to how we approach our service. Then we want to exercise passion. And so with passion, if you allow your staff to take ownership and exercise their natural abilities and talents, you would be amazed at what they can produce. But you have to trust them that they're going to do the right thing. I can guarantee you, I'm not going to say I'm at 100%, but the majority of your staff probably don't want to come in and say, you know what, I'm going to do something terrible today. I don't want to work. I want to mess things up. I want to, no one wants to be disruptive in a negative type of way. Most people don't want to be disruptive. Most people want that work in these spaces. They are passionate about the work that they do. They're passionate about serving people. We have to allow them to do it. Then that's when we have care and empathy. We want people who are empathetic. We want people who care. And we also want people to value learning. If you value learning for yourself and you value learning for your community, that drives value for the library. It drives value for your staff that you work with. It drives value for the community. And that's one of the ways in which Harris County was able to receive this medal, is by having that level of trust and belief within our staff. And I say it all the time. I really don't do this work. It's really the people in Harris County Public Library, the staff that do the work that needs to be done in reaching the community. And if you don't believe that, ask my kids. They think I just sit by a computer all day and talk to people and do meaningless work. They say, man, all you do is just talk to people and you go to meetings and what's the value in that? It's so much more beyond than what they understand. But at the end of the day, I know it's the great staff that we have at Harris County that do the work. Next slide. Okay, and so the next steps, I would just recommend do a community assessment. You know, what needs do you see in your community? And it's okay to ask them what the needs are. One of the things I saw here in this library is a QR code that's in the bathroom, and it's actually, you click the QR code because we want to know what you want in our community centers and rec centers or whatever case it be. You click the QR code, and I know I don't live here, but I did click the QR code just to see what they were asking, because I'm interested in that type of work. But it actually, what do you want from your community center? What do you want to see available to you? It's okay to do surveys. I encourage it. Do surveys. Find out what the people in your community want. The next piece of that is, what are your local municipality priorities? It is very important for you to understand what your local government wants, what outcomes they want to see for the community, because that is typically driven by what their constituents want. Believe me, the politicals, the people who are in those offices, they are very in tune to their constituents. And when we speak as library directors and go before them and say, we need more money to do this thing, they say, whatever it is, you're just like all the other departments. You're always going to ask for more money. We don't have more money. Next. But then when I have a line of constituents coming up saying, we need broadband access. Next one, we need broadband access. The next one, we need broadband. And it's like, oh, will they stop with this thing about broadband? It's okay. Because then the community is driving the value versus, they hear from us directors all the time. We're, Parks and Recs, we are always talking about, we need more money. The libraries talk about they need more money. The sheriffs in Harris County always say they need more money. The DA always says they need more money. Everyone is always asking for more money. But then when you start having people that come from the community, or even from other community-based organizations, your partners, to come out and say, without this partnership with the library, we wouldn't be able to achieve our goals. We wouldn't be able to reach the number of people that we reach. We need the library to do these things. It creates a different value driver for your spaces. Complement the work that your government, your local government does. They would appreciate it. They will embrace it. They may just even provide you with more funding, because they understand that they have to make that tax dollar show value. And if they don't make that tax dollar show value, it's just like they're throwing money into a black hole, and which we all know that they do. They just, some things get funded and we're just like, why not let you do that? Because it really doesn't make sense. But a lot of times it's the constituents drive. And we may not understand that. It may give them political points that are beyond our understanding. And so that's where we have to engage with our politicals or our municipalities and be part of government to help drive how those dollars are spent within our communities. And I just put some examples of some community needs that I'm noticing in Harris County. Issues with mental health support, digital literacy, veteran services, broadband access. And so for me, part of my process is to kind of sit back and observe. And when I observe these things that's happening, I'm going to identify who's really in Harris County and Houston area that's working on mental health. And I'm going to go meet with those people, have a conversation with them. And I'm not even thinking about taking any type of action. I'm just thinking about, let me identify where these gaps are at and strategically plot and plan who I'm going to work with in order to have the best effect. So when I'm talking to mental health, or people about mental health, I may not necessarily collaborate or partner with an organization that's just now getting their feet wet in terms of mental health. I may look at more organizations as more seasoned in this space, who have more experience and can have a greater impact in order to find out how I identify. But then with those same smaller organizations, I keep them in mind, because you never know the potential of that organization and how you may want to activate them to help you do this other thing. And so it's like, I may work with this larger organization around mental health. I understand that this is a mom and pop shop down here who's trying to work on mental health. And then as a library, I connect the dots. And so making that connection between the smaller organization and larger organization, and so that we can have these outcomes that everyone wants in terms of managing mental health. Because you are going to have a variety of organizations, some more well established, some may not be established, but how do you connect the dots so that you can leverage that resource, whether big or small, to even just direct it to go into the same direction? And so sometimes that's what we do as libraries. We just connect the dots. We help guide the ship, all the ships, into the same direction, and so that we can all have the best outcomes for our communities. And so look at your communities, see where the needs are at, identify what those needs are, identify who's the key players, the stakeholders in those, and make those connections, connect the dots for them. And some people may not even understand what all of those resources are, but it's good to be able to say, hey, I know this organization over here that's doing this thing, the same thing or similar thing that you're doing, that can possibly complement what you're doing. And we can help as a library to help connect this and convene this type of thing, facilitate it in order to have a great good for the community. And so with this work, that's what I would recommend. Connecting the dots, understand the community, and build upon that. Nothing is going to happen overnight. Take small steps, a little work at a time, chip away at it, chip away at it, chip away. Some of these issues we'll never be able to tackle in our lifetimes. And that's okay. And this, for me, it's understandable that we're not going to tackle some of these issues. Illiteracy is going to be around forever. The need for information is going to be around forever. The information to the ability to earn income for people to work. Those are going to be needs that are never going to be fully addressed. I don't care what type of system, whether it's a democracy or communist or social, any of those systems in place can never address all of the issues that society brings forth. So that's the beauty of libraries. We fill in the gap to help people get to where they want to be in life, to improve their quality of life. Okay, so with closing, next slide, I just want to say, exercise empathy and live your purpose. Everyone has a purpose. And if you live out that purpose, one of the books that I'm listening to right now is The Alchemist by
Paulo Coelho.
Paulo Coelho. I can never say his last name.
I'm not sure.
It sounds right. Paulo Coelho. But in that book, the whole principle behind that book is everyone to live out your personal legend. And if you take the active steps to live out your personal legend, the universe will align, the universe will conspire for your success. And we may not see it, but I've experienced it time and time again, that the things that I know that are going to help the greater good of everyone, things just align for me and they just come into play. My staff always asks me, how did you make that connection? How did you meet those people? I really don't know sometimes. Sometimes it's just because I know what I want to do in terms of making a better community, creating a very better Harris County, and people come to me, organizations come to me, I meet people. Even today, thank you for inviting me because it helped me to get perspective on some of the things that I need to be working on. You know, Wendy being here, and so it's in my mind. I've been battling. You know, I really need to be more involved with TLA. I want to do this legislative thing, but when I came back to Houston and Harris County, I was really active in TLA. And then I got busy in my work at Harris County, and I kind of fell off with the TLA. And so with Wendy coming here today, I was just like, wow, I really need to get back involved with TLA. I need to really help move this thing with legislation that, you know, I need to quit talking about it and really be about it. And so thank you for allowing me to come and share my experience and be part of the work that you all do. And even for you all, you know, thank you for the work that you do in your local communities. Continue to do that work. It's important, it's valuable. Position your work, position your libraries in a space and place that drive that economic value for your communities. Let those political decision makers know about your work so that you can get the funding that you need. Because that's what, at the end of the day, when we talk about libraries and support and we talk about funding, it's all economic based. I mean, I don't care how we want to look at it, that we know we're outside of that whole political economic spectrum. We are really part of it. So we really have to understand, how do we embrace that? How do we utilize that? And for me, I am, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. I really don't like talking. I really don't like communicating with people that I don't know. I don't like, you know, and I used to be intimidated by commissioners and county judges and senators and legislators until I started meeting with them. And then when I started meeting with them, I was like, this dude talk just like I do. He got problems just like I got problems. He got stress just like I got stress. So what is this big barrier that I have personally placed between me and them? It's like they wake up, breathe, think just like I do. And so, okay, I can do this. I can go talk to them. I can have these conversations. And the more and more that I built up rapport with them, the better it's been for me in terms of getting support for the library. And so it's, you know, when I first came into the county, for a commissioner to call me, I always thought that, oh, a commissioner calls me, I've done something wrong. The library system has done something wrong. But over the years, I've built up relationships with a commissioner. He'll just give me a call and say, hey, yeah, what's going on? I'm thinking about a new building over here on El Camino. And you want some space in that building I'm getting ready to build? Oh, yeah, commissioner. I want some of that space. Finally with some of that space. Or it may be a thing where I got a commissioner who he wants to put murals all over downtown Houston. And so with that, he was just like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a mural. And every year the same commissioner, I started talking to him about intellectual freedom, book censoring. And then the Harris County was established as a book sanctuary, Harris County Public Library. The Commissioners Court supported that, recognized us as a book sanctuary. He said, man, I want to do something around this bamboo thing, because that was his jam. He wanted to do something about censorship. He wanted to speak up about, you know, intellectual freedom. And I was just like, yeah, let's do a mural. Let's. And so he did this huge graphic art mural downtown about book censoring. And they did photos and everything. Because for him, it was just like, you know, to politicians, they want that for a little while. They want to be able to tout what they're doing, what they support. And so now every year I take advantage of that. When book week come up, I'm like, hey, Commissioner, what you doing this year? Or he'll give me a call. Yeah, I'm getting ready to do this thing. You want to be part of it? Of course. But we've normalized that relationship. And so now it's easy for me to call him, for him to call me. And it's not that thing of friction where I initially thought, if I get a call from a commissioner, we've done something wrong, or, you know, it's a problem. Now it's a thing of, I see that call from the commissioner, I'm like, oh, yeah, how can we work together? You know, or any of these other organizations, even with the state legislation. When we got nominated for this, it was easy for us to ask for that nomination from Lizzie Fletcher, from Sheila Jackson Lee, because we had those relationships already established. We had been working with them, talking with them, working on grant proposals, submitting those to their offices. And so they was already familiar with the work that we did. So it was easy for us to pick up that call and say, hey, we need this nomination. Can we get your support? And then it's easy. Well, easier. Let me say it that way. But that's all that I have. If you have additional questions for me, I'm open to that. If you want to contact me, my email is there. But it was wonderful, and thank you all for indulging my presentation.